I'm a nurse, and my brother invited his girlfriend on the trip to Italy I spent 2 years saving for, then told me I should just stay home. Let me back up, because to understand why that sentence hit as hard as it did, you need to understand what kind of family I grew up in. I'm the oldest of three. My brother Kyle is 28, 2 years younger than me. My sister is 24. I love them both. I want to say that up front because what I'm about to tell you isn't a story about hating my family. It's a story about finally understanding that love without boundaries isn't love. It's just a habit. Growing up, I was the responsible one. The one who did well in school, got a scholarship, worked through college, graduated with no debt. My parents were proud of me in the abstract way. Parents are proud when a kid doesn't cause problems. Kyle, on the other hand, was the social one. Charming, funny, a little irresponsible in ways that always got forgiven because he meant well. He'd borrow money and forget to pay it back. He'd cancel plans at the last minute. He'd show up late to everything and everyone would laugh it off because that's just Kyle. I never resented him for it. Not really. We were close in the way siblings are close when they grow up sharing a bathroom and a backseat on long car rides. He knew how I took my coffee. I knew which music he put on when he was stressed. We weren't perfect, but we were solid. When I got my nursing license at 25, I started saving for something I'd wanted since I was a kid. A trip to the Amalfi Coast. Specifically, a villa rental on the cliffside in Positano. I'd seen a photo of it in a travel magazine at my dentist's office when I was 11 years old, and I'd never forgotten it. Terraced lemon gardens, the sea that color of blue that doesn't look real in pictures, but apparently is. Little boats dotting the harbor. I ripped the page out and kept it in a shoebox under my bed for years. So when I finally had a stable income, I started a dedicated savings account. I named it Positano. I put in $250 every month without fail for 2 years. I picked up extra shifts when I could. I skipped vacations, turned down weekend trips with friends, said no to things I actually wanted to do because I had a goal. By the time I had enough, I'd saved just over $9,000. The original plan was simple. I would take my 2 best friends, Cora and Tabitha, to Italy for 10 days. We'd rent a villa that slept 6, split the cost, see Rome for 2 days, then drive south to Positano and spend the rest of the week there. I found the villa online, read every review, cross-referenced photos, emailed the owner twice to confirm details. It cost $4,200 for the rental, split 3 ways. My share was $1,400. I paid the deposit in January. The trip was set for late June. Then Kyle called me in March. I remember exactly where I was. Sitting in my car in the hospital parking garage after a 12-hour shift. Eating a granola bar because I hadn't had time for lunch. He sounded excited, which with Kyle could mean anything from I found a 20 in my old jeans to I quit my job to open a food truck. He said he'd heard about the Italy trip through Mom. Said it sounded incredible. Said he'd always wanted to go to Italy. And then, with the ease of someone asking to borrow a pen, he asked if he and his girlfriend could come. His girlfriend, at that point, was someone he'd been dating for about 4 months. I'd met her once at a birthday dinner. She seemed nice enough. I didn't know her. I told Kyle I'd think about it. Honestly, my first instinct was to say yes. The villa slept 6. Cora and Tabitha were easygoing. It was possible. But I also knew that Cora and Tabitha had been planning this trip with me for months, and adding 2 strangers into a 10-day vacation is not a small thing. I told him I needed to talk to the others first. Cora said she wasn't sure but she'd be open to it. Tabitha said, and I'm quoting here, "I don't love it, but it's your trip, so whatever you decide." I took that as a gentle no from Tabitha. So I called Kyle back and said I was sorry, but the group dynamic was already set, and adding 2 more people to a 10-day villa trip felt like a lot. I offered a compromise. If he and his girlfriend wanted to do a separate trip to Italy someday, I would love to help him plan it. He took it fine. At least, he seemed to. My mother did not take it fine. She called me 2 days later and said she'd heard Kyle was upset. I didn't know he was upset. He'd said okay on the phone and we'd moved on. But apparently he'd told her he felt left out of the family, which is an interesting framing for being told he couldn't join a trip he had no part in planning or paying for. Mom said she thought I was being selfish. She said family is supposed to come first. She said I had room in the villa and I was choosing not to include my own brother, which made her sad. I stayed calm. I explained the situation again. I told her Tabitha wasn't comfortable with two new people joining. I told her I'd offered an alternative. I told her the trip had been in planning for months and Kyle had heard about it last week. She said, "I just think you could try harder." I let it go. I thought it was over. It was not over. About 3 weeks before the trip, I got a call from my father. This was unusual. Dad isn't much of a phone caller. He's more of a nod at family dinner kind of communicator. So when he called on a Tuesday afternoon, I knew something was up. He said he wanted to talk about Italy. He said he understood this was my trip and my money, and he wanted to acknowledge that. He said, however, and that, however, was doing a lot of work. However, Kyle and his girlfriend had already looked into flights. They were ready to book. His girlfriend had never been to Europe, and it would mean a lot to the family if I could find a way to make it work. I asked him what specifically he thought I should do. He said maybe Cora or Tabitha could make other plans. Maybe they could stay in a nearby hotel instead of the villa. Maybe I could see if the villa had availability for extra guests. I was quiet for a moment. Then I said, "Dad, Cora and Tabitha are paying for part of this trip. I can't ask them to stay in a hotel so Kyle's girlfriend can have their room." He said he understood. He said he just wanted me to think about it. I did think about it. And the more I thought about it, the more something started to shift in me. A slow, quiet kind of shift. The kind you don't notice until you're already on the other side of it. I started looking back at things. The Christmas when I was 17 and I'd asked for a specific art kit. I was really into watercolors that year, and my parents got it for me. But then my brother decided he wanted it, and my mom suggested I let him try it since he was going through a hard time at school. I let him try it. He used it twice and left it under his bed. I never asked for it back. The graduation dinner, my senior year of college. My parents took us all out to celebrate, which was genuinely lovely. But the reservation was at 6:30, and at 6:15 Kyle texted that he was running late. Could we push it to 7? They pushed it to 7. I sat at the restaurant in my graduation cap because I'd come straight from the ceremony, a small thing. Not worth mentioning, I told myself. The time I was in the hospital for an emergency appendectomy. I was 26, and my mother stayed with me in the recovery room, which I was grateful for. And then Kyle called in a panic because he'd locked his keys in his car 40 minutes away, and she left to go help him. Again, small. Again, not worth mentioning. I had a shoebox in the back of my mind full of moments like that. I'd never opened it before. But sitting in my apartment after that phone call from my dad, I opened it. I didn't say any of this to anyone. I just sat with it. The week before the trip, my mother called again. She said she'd been thinking and she had a solution. She said Cora had mentioned to someone. I still don't know how my mother knows Cora's social circle, but she does. That she was thinking about not going because of some scheduling issue at work. Mom said if Cora wasn't going anyway, there would be a free space in the villa, and maybe Kyle and his girlfriend could take it. I called Cora immediately. Cora said she had mentioned some stress about taking time off, but she was absolutely still going. She was confused about how that had gotten back to my mother. So my mother had taken a passing comment about work stress, converted it into a confirmed cancellation, and used it to build a case for why my brother should come on my trip. I didn't confront her about it. I just noted it, filed it away. The thing about being a nurse is that you spend a lot of time in situations that require you to stay calm when you don't feel calm. You learn to read a room without reacting to it. You learn to hold steady when things are falling apart around you. I'd been doing a version of that with my family for years without realizing it. 5 days before departure, Kyle texted me directly. He said he and his girlfriend had found a great deal on flights to Naples, and they were thinking about booking. He said he knew the timing was weird, but maybe we could overlap for part of the trip. He said his girlfriend was beyond excited about Italy. I did not respond for 24 hours. I needed to think. What I kept coming back to was something one of my patients had said to me once, an older woman recovering from a hip replacement, sharp as anything, who'd told me with complete conviction, "Honey, people treat you exactly as well as you let them." I'd thought about that sentence a lot over the years. I was thinking about it now. I called Kyle back. I told him I was glad he was excited about Italy. I told him I hoped he and his girlfriend could go someday. And then I told him, clearly without raising my voice, that he was not coming on this trip. That I'd said no in March, and that answer hadn't changed. That I loved him, but this was not a family trip. It was a trip I'd planned and saved for on my own, with 2 specific people, and that wasn't changing 5 days before we left. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Mom's going to be really upset." I said, "I know." I hung up and then I sat on my kitchen floor for a while, not crying exactly, just settling. My mother called that night, then my father. I let both calls go to voicemail. My mother's voicemail was long and upset and included the phrase, "I don't know who you've become lately." My father's was shorter, just that he was worried about the family, and he hoped I'd reconsider. I didn't reconsider. We flew out 4 days later. Cora, Tabitha, and I landed in Rome on a Thursday morning and took a car to our hotel near the Pantheon. We had 48 hours in the city before driving south. We ate carbonara at a place with no English menu, walked until our feet gave out, stood in front of the Trevi fountain at midnight when the crowds had thinned, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Just genuinely, uncomplicated, good. On the drive south to Positano, the landscape changed in a way I wasn't prepared for. The highway gave way to winding coastal road, and then suddenly there was the sea. That blue. The one from the magazine. The one I'd kept in a shoebox under my bed when I was 11 years old. I had to ask Cora to pull over for a minute. I'm not someone who cries easily. Occupational hazard, I've learned to hold a lot. But standing on the side of that road with the Tyrrhenian Sea spread out below me, I cried a little. Just for a second. Tabitha pretended not to notice and then handed me a bottle of water without saying anything. Which is one of the reasons she's been my best friend since college. The villa was everything. Stone floors, terracotta pots of herbs on the balcony, a view that made every single shift I'd ever picked up feel like it had been worth it. We spent 6 days doing almost nothing, swam in the sea, ate too much fresh mozzarella, took a boat to Capri on day 4, watched the sun go down every evening from that balcony with cheap local wine that tasted expensive. My phone was mostly off. I checked it occasionally. There were texts from my mother, a few from Kyle, one from my father. I didn't respond to any of them. Not out of anger, or not entirely out of anger. Mostly because I needed those days to be mine, fully mine, not shadowed by other people's feelings about my choices. On the last evening, Tabitha asked me how I was feeling about going home. I thought about it for a while before answering. I said I was dreading it a little. Not the flight, but what was waiting on the other side of it. She said, "You know you don't have to fix it immediately, right?" I did know that, but knowing something and believing it are two different things. And I'd spent most of my life being very good at fixing things for other people very quickly. We flew back on a Sunday. I was home by 9 in the morning. By noon, my mother had called twice. I answered the second call. The conversation was not easy. She told me I'd embarrassed the family. I asked her who she thought I'd embarrassed the family in front of, since the only people on the trip were me and my 2 friends. She said I knew what she meant. I said I didn't think I did, actually. She said Kyle's girlfriend was hurt because she'd felt excluded. I pointed out, as gently as I could manage, that Kyle's girlfriend and I had met exactly once, and that exclusion implies a prior expectation of inclusion that had never existed. She said I was being a lawyer. I said I was being a nurse, which is different. She was quiet for a moment. Then, she said what I think she'd actually been building toward the whole time. "I just don't understand why you've been so different lately." I thought about that. Then I said, "Mom, I think I've been exactly the same. I just stopped assuming that what I want doesn't matter." She didn't have a response to that. We ended the call shortly after, politely but without resolution. In the weeks that followed, I talked to Kyle once. It was awkward and short, mostly logistics about a family birthday coming up. He didn't apologize and I didn't ask for one. My mother and I exchanged a handful of texts. Surface level, careful. My father sent me a link to an article about the Amalfi Coast and said it looked beautiful. I think that was his version of an olive branch, and I accepted it as one. Things with my family are not the same as they were before. I'm not sure they will be, but I've also realized that the same as before was not actually the thing I should have been protecting. The thing I should have been protecting was the ability to plan something for myself, save for it, work toward it, and enjoy it without apologizing for any of those things. The night I got back, after I'd unpacked and showered and eaten a bowl of cereal standing at my kitchen counter, I went through my camera roll. 640 photos in 10 days. The sea, the lemons, the terracotta, Cora laughing at a restaurant, Tabitha asleep in the passenger seat on the drive south, my own face in a mirror at the villa, tan and tired, and I kept looking at this one for a while, clearly happy. I found the photo I'd taken from the side of the road when we'd stopped, the one where the sea is below and the sky is doing something impossible with the light. I set it as my phone wallpaper. Every time I pick up my phone now, I see it. And I think I built that. Every shift, every skipped weekend trip, every $250 a month. I built that for myself. That's not a small thing.